Hello, welcome to the first in my 5-part series called Smash VAT. My name is Charelle Griffith. I'm a business and marketing strategist that specialises in helping solo coaches, consultants, and online service providers. And I am putting this series together to inspire and motivate other solopreneurs to increase their revenue, go through the VAT threshold in 2023. Now, I'm checking. Can you see me, Krystle, yet?
It's not showing up on my phone, so it's
Okay.
not giving me a notification. But let me try and search you.
No worries. We are just
in the chat to see if you're.
Yeah, if there is anyone that is watching live, if you could comment in the chat. I cannot see myself. This is the joy of trying out new things in tech. So I just want to know that I actually am there. So if anyone can see, if not, oh yeah, you can see me. Fabulous. Let's go. So I'm joined today by Krystle, who I'm super excited about. Krystle is also in the LinkedIn Create Accelerator program with me, so it's nice to be collaborating with fellow creators. But this talk is going to be just all the things about finance, and Krystle definitely comes from a more behavioural specialist side of it. So we have later on this week got someone that's coming from an accountant and a bookkeeper. Obviously, even though you was an accountant before, weren't you? I haven't got that wrong, have I? So this is going to be much more of a numbers side and then a bit of the mindset side of things. But as I said, this is 1 of 5. So if this one's not your thing, make sure you check out the ones that are coming up. But Krystle, if you want to do your proper introduction so everyone gets to know who you are, that'd be fabulous.
Sure thing. Hi everyone, Krystle McGilvery here, all the letters in the surname. So as Charelle said, background as a chartered accountant. I worked in finance, heading up finance teams for about 15 years, and I have since left that to focus on personal finance and business finance for founders. More specifically, the psychological side and getting you to be in a place where you are free, have clarity, confidence to improve your personal finances and build a good sustainable business.
Yes, and that is exactly what I hear. And I think the confidence side of things is definitely something that I really want to touch on too, because I know one of the reasons why I've decided to do this series is because lots of people have a mental barrier around that could have been absolutely just to do with something that someone once upon a time told them, like, oh, you don't want to be VAT registered. And there's actually no like logical reason behind it. It actually is just like a psychological one. So I think that's something I definitely wanted to delve into further. So I suppose just to kick off, it would be interesting to know your sort of take on why going through that is something that is is beneficial for business owners, and what some of the mindset things you should try and address, just to like, they're not true, like don't listen to what everyone else says basically, and actually starting to focus on yourself rather than some of the noise that might have been outside.
Well, I think this is the case when it comes to finance in general. When you're not a finance expert, you haven't got a finance background, it's really easy for you to latch on to things you hear in hearsay, right? So, we anchor, we're primed, we hear all this noise, and when we are not confident in an area such as finance, it's easy for us to, okay, well, that must be the truth. That's going to dictate everything I do with my finances. So that must be the same thing from what it seems to me when it comes to VAT and not surpassing the VAT threshold. Because if we go over to taxes in general, people have a lot of confusion about tax. So the same if we compare it actually, when we talk about or hear people talk about kind of increasing their salary and going into a higher tax bracket, they see that as a bad thing because they think that means they're going to take home less money. Whereas those of us who understand it's not, it's a tiered system and it's just the extra income that you're taxed the extra amount on. But I think it's the same kind of confusion there. People assume automatically that if you pass the VAT threshold, it means you're going to have less money. But of course, in terms of your business model and your pricing strategy, that should come into play when you're, increasing your income to get to that point.
I'm really glad you mentioned about the similarity to like income tax brackets, because I do think it's that same thing. I know so many people that's like, oh, you don't want to be a high tax bracket earner, and it's like that's what I feel like VAT. It's like it's just something that's been said, and then people have just like owned it, and they actually haven't like challenged it and thought, well, do you know what, is this right for my circumstances? And actually that is something I really want to explore, is the idea it isn't necessarily going to be right for everyone, but what I want you to do is I want everyone to actually reassess it from their perspective rather than just having this, I heard something once, I've ignored it. Now obviously, as you mentioned, you did have a background in accounting, and I think that's an interesting concept, that now you've got that real solid background, but now you've moved out and really looking at like the psychological side of things. And one of the things we mentioned in our talk before was about this idea that accountants only look at certain aspects of your money. And actually, I know business owners that can feel like, I've got an accountant, like what else do I need to talk about? So I'd like to chat a bit about how really what an accountant does like do for you, and the things that they don't do, or they might not do, and therefore you might need to either concentrate on that yourself, or you might need to get some other sort of support to ensure you've got a real holistic perspective of your finances.
Well, I think the first thing to understand is if you're a director of a company, you are responsible 100%. Not to make it all sound scary and doom and gloom, but you are solely responsible, regardless of whether you've said, hey, accountant, do my blah, blah, it doesn't matter. It still comes back to you. So I say that in combination with, I know that a lot of people are not comfortable when it comes to their finances. They don't understand it. It can be really confusing and overwhelming. But I think if you keep it the center of your focus, that you should and have to be responsible for that, use that as your kind of your navigating star and say, okay, I need to take slow steps to build that confidence, to take control of my finances. Now, in terms of an accountant, traditionally, and I don't want to any accountants to come at me for this. But
no, don't worry. And Debbie's going to talk about this in more detail. So we know this is like a generalistic overview.
Yeah, I mean, historically, an accountant is there for compliance and making sure that things are reported correctly, etc., etc. They're not necessarily there to sit down and educate you about your business and hold your hand through the process of building a business. That's not necessarily an accountant's role. And I think where a lot of businesses and people that I've gone on to support as founders have struggled is because they've assumed the accountant, whether it's their personal, self-assessment return or their company accounts, they've assumed that the accountant will come back to them and, give them a whole explanation about what this means, how they're going to grow their business. And that's not their job. It's, again, back to you to identify the gaps in your knowledge or your understanding or weaknesses in your business, or even like we're talking about, the fear of passing the fat threshold and think, okay, let me seek help in that area to look at my business holistically, understand what's going on, and take the road to get me to improve profits and build a sustainable business, etc. And that's not necessarily an accountant, but I say that with a caveat because as time's going by and things are changing, especially as we've got so many amazing resources to manage your finances digitally yourself, it does mean that an accountant's role is evolving, and you're coming across many accountants who are providing the extra service. I mean, myself, I don't do the actual bookkeeping side of it and sending compliance and that kind of thing. I'm more in the business holistically and growing the business and focus on you, the founder, and getting you confident to make those decisions on your own.
No, I think that's a really good point, and something that is important. Therefore, now when you are looking for an accountant, is to understand that the title does not mean everyone does the same thing. Because I've definitely come across more accountants nowadays, particularly those that are working with smaller business owners, that realise that they do need a bit more support than just, let me just do this at the end of the year, let me send off your return, done. And so there are accountants that are offering those services. So you just need to work out, if you've got an accountant, is that something that you are being provided with and it is being covered? And if it isn't, then actually do you need to seek out some other support in order to make that happen?
And let me just jump in on that point as well. And just to touch on a bookkeeper compared to an accountant, for example, a bookkeeper literally is there for the transactions and just to put things through the system and get things into a space where it's all together, which is different from an accountant. So there are quite a few different roles. And like you said, Charelle, it's a matter of really getting clear about what it is they're going to do, and maybe see if you can read some articles about the different roles and, okay, where does your finance person sit on that? And is that enough for you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a really good point, because not everyone does understand the difference between a bookkeeper and accountant, and also that it doesn't help if some people do both, and some, like you said, some accountants are still very much in the traditional space, some of them are adding on the additional services. So even just it's like knowing the title is one thing, but actually understanding what the person you're working with is offering you. And sometimes I've seen as well accountants that like it's an additional service that they might be adding on, so it might be actually you're not having access to it right now, but if you had that conversation, they would be able to provide you with it.
Yeah, I like that.
And now, one of the things you did mention in there was about profit. And definitely, I have had a few comments when I first started this series all about this idea of like, well, you shouldn't be encouraging people just to increase their revenue. And the reality is I am 100%, like, I'm definitely not one of those people that is like, whether it's hitting back, whether it's, so you're trying to get to 85K, whether you're trying to get to that 6 figures mark, I am absolutely not about just increasing revenue for the sake of increasing revenue. My whole mission on this is actually for business owners to be able to pay themselves better. But I know for the majority of people that starts with increasing revenue. And actually, like, that is the number that most people focus on more than profit. But optimizing for profit is really important. You do not want to be just increasing your revenue and actually paying yourself less. And that is something that I'm going to be talking about more when I talk to Fiona about her experiences of actually going above that and actually what she was able to do with her own finances and paying herself. But what would be some of the things people should be looking at if they are increasing their revenue, and you want to ensure that it's not just increasing your revenue to go through that for pointless sake, but you actually make more money?
It's a really good question, and it's funny. I've had a few clients who I've worked with, and I'm got some new clients sign up this month, and a lot of them have increased their revenue and they're earning really great figures, 6 figures, etc., but they're not taking home any money. They're
literally, this is the bit that makes me want to. I've had some of these in the DMs, and I'm like, no.
And do you know what? I think it's so easy to do. It's a bit like I forget what it's called. Is it called salary creep? I can't remember the term. Something creep. But basically, as your salary increases, you tend to spend more.
Lifestyle creep.
Lifestyle creep. That's the term. Like, you buy a big house, you buy a big car, you go on more holidays, and what you keep is nothing or less or the same as before you had the pay rise. And I think the same thing happens with business. When you're not strategic about your growth and really understand the numbers and build a plan and see clearly that, okay, me doing this on the income side, what happens on the cost side? What do I need to pay for additionally for me to generate that revenue? It's really matching those two things and seeing, okay, I want to take home more money. That's my goal. If that's the focus, like you said, Charelle. Okay, what does that look like? How am I going to do that? It doesn't just mean adding on more products or more services or more appointments or whatever it may be, because the additional costs associated might just wipe out your income anyway. Yes. So I think it's about really understanding those numbers. And that's where, again, paired with people not being confident about their business finances, I can see how doing that is a bit daunting. But the narrative of, oh, look, my income's increased might reassure you. Those two things don't quite work together if you're not clear on the numbers. And it does just mean sitting down with someone who is, an Excel whiz or really understands business. You want to keep it simple. You don't want to pay for a proper finance person, but just fleshing that out. What does that look like? What are the different elements for me to increase?
And I think that's the thing, is actually sitting down with the numbers. And it's something that I do with clients when I look for the year ahead, is actually, I'm very much like, I am not a finance specialist in any way, shape or form, but I am probably a little bit of an Excel whiz. So I can be that actually with people, just be like, on a basic level though, actually, if you're trying to grow your business, is let's actually look at what that does mean in terms of, from a resources perspective, you're going to have more costs, and how does that make sure that you still are going to be making a profit? Because as we said, if you don't ignore that, particularly when it ends up being that to grow your business, you end up having to add people in, those costs, all of a sudden you're like, actually, this is not working. And so there are some very considered things you need to think about when you are increasing your revenue. So really keep an eye on profit. And as Krystle said, if you aren't comfortable with the numbers, like, work with someone. And that's actually something that, like, because of the level of forecasting, that's not, you have to necessarily have someone on an ongoing basis. Like, actually someone can sit down with you as a one-off. And I think that's something that people don't necessarily understand either.
And just a couple of points on that, actually. The first point, and I often talk about this part of your finance is actually creative. I think a lot of people, it is. A lot of people are afraid, and I did a post the other day about dyscalculia and the fear of maths, but a lot of people think that this is a mathematical thing, and it really isn't. I mean, when I'm doing this with people, I use Excel just to get the numbers out and just crunch them on, but it's a pre-populated document. So all we're doing is just popping in some numbers that look great. We work through it in that way.
Yeah.
And, calculated itself. So that's the first point. It's a creative task, and it's actually really fun. I've had a lot of creatives as clients who've got creative businesses, and then naturally, a lot of them hate finance, right? But actually, after they've finished working with, they're like, Krystle, I quite like finance. I'm like, yes,
yes.
That's the first point I wanted to make. And then just on the VAT side, which I just want to come back to, is, again, when it comes to increasing your revenue and passing the threshold of VAT, sure, that means your outward price is going to be higher, but that's where going back to your finance model, your business model, understanding how does this look, what am I doing, it can make complete sense. And also understanding your audience, your clientele, and that price mark, what do you have to do there to still be able to get them accustomed.
So one of the mindset blocks definitely comes up, as you said there, about increasing your prices, is then people go in, well, my clients aren't going to be able to afford me. And this fear, particularly if you are someone that provide services on like a B2C, so it's other people that can't claim that VAT back, that makes you feel like, oh, what, like people are just not going to buy. So what could be just something, if someone's one of their fears is around increasing their prices, that's specifically why they don't want to do it. Have you got any tips for how you can start to address those fears?
Yeah, it's funny. I was talking to someone literally yesterday who has just increased their prices, and they're seeing that their clientele, that their number of clients has dropped back. And I think what you need to understand is different price points will attract different types of people, and it's understanding that, okay, what will be the impact of me changing my price to this? And usually, depending on your industry, the higher your price, maybe the less clients you have, depending on the kind of work you're doing. And that's absolutely fine, as long as you're, again, going back to your business model, the numbers make sense. You know, and it might just be a process. So initially, sure, you'll lose those clients, but then your targeting, your marketing, and this is where you come in, Charelle, I guess, is attracting those clientele for that new price.
Yeah, and also remembering that you can lose a percentage of clients. Like when you increase your prices, you can lose a percentage and still make more overall. And I think that's the thing as well. It's like the gut reaction is, I'm not going to get enough clients, and that's going to be like the end of it. I'm like, actually, it might mean that you can lose one or two, and that's not going to have a negative impact on your business. So like you said, really going back to understanding your business model, your financial model of actually, if I go through this, what will the impact be on my prices, but also then what does that mean I can do and what I can't do. And I think, like you said, that's where like forecasting, like I am setting this to tell people like this is something to aim for across 2023. I'm not telling you to do this tomorrow, because that's the reality, is like that your business wouldn't have time to prepare properly. But actually, when you're seeing this as a longer term goal, there is that time to do the prep and the planning, and so you can feel really, like you said, confident about what these changes will mean to your business.
And as well, to think about it in another way, I guess if you've got lower price ticket customers, clients, you're doing more work. If you have a higher price, you have less clients, which means it's less time, which surely that's walking towards the path or the lifestyle you want to have and the kind of business you want to have, or, you know, depending on how your business model looks.
Yeah. And also there is an argument to say that also you don't have to stick to exactly the same services you have right now. This is also an opportunity when you're looking and you're thinking about it, is actually, well, maybe there are different ways for me to be working, where there's different ways for me to package up my expertise and then like how my products and my services out there. So actually, like you said, Krystle, sometimes like being creative, like actually that might, if you're doing those numbers and you're looking at it, you might realize actually if that's going up, then maybe I need something in between to serve that target market, and then you'll have like a better range of services that will have something for everyone at every price point.
See, when I do this with people, I think what happens is once you start churning and going on with your business and you're in the thick of it and you've got to make this change, or you're thinking about making this change, you often lose sight of yourself and what it is you want to have. So a lot of my work usually means going back to you. What is it you envisioned? What kind of lifestyle did you want? What kind of business did you want to have? What do you see in the next year or so? And really getting clear on that again. And then as well, tackling the limiting beliefs you have in place that are stopping you from making those decisions to have that kind of business. And that's usually the starting point to going down the path of, okay, undo that, get rid of that, that fog. Okay, what's the truth? What's realistic? Look at some data or whatever. Get that real narrative back in your mind and then work towards that.
Yeah, and I'm probably quite similar. It's that idea that sometimes you're just too close to your own business, that you're not able to really see. And I'm the same when I'm talking to people, at the moment I'm busy doing strategy days for people for the new year, and really what do you want to achieve in 2023, and does your business still support that? And actually it could be that whilst you are, I had a conversation with some of the DMs, it very was clear that because of her business model and the outsourcing she was doing, that actually growing her revenue above that and having to deal with that wasn't the right choice. And I think, again, that's fine. It clearly came, and she was very articulate with me with all her numbers in the DMs. So I was like, you know what? That is fine, because you are on it. And that's that difference of actually being she knows what she wanted. She was covering. She was very happy with what she was paying herself, and knew that actually that change was not good. What we are trying to look at is actually if that change would be better. If you making more money would allow you to pay yourself more, and that does support your lifestyle. So if you currently have a business that isn't providing for you financially in the way you want it to do, that's the change you have to make. Understand your numbers and then start to plan to grow them.
I like that because from what we're saying, it sounds like it comes back to you just getting clear about what you want and not just kind of having a reset button. Okay, let's just down tools, have a think here, and does this make sense? And then as well, I think I just want to hone in on just really the creative side. I think you said, you know, you can offer different services, so diversifying what it is you offer, how you offer it, that's absolutely fine. And sometimes it means you need to have a conversation with someone outside of the business to kind of poke you and get those juices flowing, which have kind of been suppressed because you've been stuck in the thick of it. And that's usually what happens when I work with people. It's like, have you thought of this? They're like, oh my God, that's so simple. I could implement that like tomorrow. And, you know, it would bring in another source of revenue.
Yeah, and I think there's always a time to look back and be like, actually, do I need to shake things up? Like, or do I need to carry on? And if you decide to carry on, it's exactly the same, that's fine. But I'm like, reviewing is really important. Like, I am a big believer of at least once a year, review your prices, review what you're offering, and being like, are they still fit for purpose for the business that I am going to be growing into the next year? Now, I know you did touch on the old thing about pricing, and I know that's another thing where people are like, there's no good price, there's no right price, there's no wrong price. And I talk about pricing a lot, and I'm like, it's not some dark art. I mainly talk about these are the things where, you know, you definitely got your pricing wrong, rather than actually trying to get perfect pricing, because I think that actually is like, there is no perfect price unless you're a really big company and have got like masses of data to be able to do that. So have you got any, like, in terms of like just advice for people that are pricing by themselves, in order to be like, they were to be thinking for the future, just things to like keep an eye out for, check on, anything like that?
I think with the whole pricing conversation, it starts with, again, what is it you want? What kind of business do you want? What kind of take-home pay do you want? What does your lifestyle allow? I think I was talking to Claire, who's part of the LinkedIn Creators Program, about price. I think it was Claire. We're talking about pricing, you know, what is it you want to take home, and how much time do you have for that? And kind of doing the matching there. And then also question yourself, looking at the market, what you're offering, can you actually demand that? Is that realistic? You know, the market has to be willing to pay for what you're selling, right?
Yeah.
And then I think the other point, which I think people often don't realize, is you can change your price. You can test. You can see how it goes. There's no harm in that. You know, you could put your price at whatever, raise it to this, you know, rickets, whatever. No one's interested. And then bring it back down. You can test it out if you're really unsure. If you're offering a really bespoke, a really unique service, and you don't know how to get it in the market, try something out. Do some number crunching, see what makes sense to you, feels good. Try it out. If no one wants it, go back to the drawing board. And that's absolutely
And that's the same. I mean, it's also the same with offers. Like I say to people, there's something, you know, I had someone recently that had a service they really wanted to offer, and they just had no belief that anyone was going to buy it. And I was like, do you know all you can do is actually put it out there? And like, you could say forever, like, no one's ever going to buy at this price. But if you don't actually put it out there to get that information, you're never, ever going to know. And again, I really think pricing is one of those things where working with someone else can make a difference. Just to have someone, I actually got massively challenged yesterday by someone being like, you need to massively up your prices. And she's like, you don't need to listen to me if you don't want to. And I was like, no, like, I will take, like, I trust her. Let's take the unsolicited advice. But I'm like, actually, it's only we can be too close, that we don't see exactly what we're providing, so people can challenge you. So it is actually sit back, have a look, like you said, have a look at what else is around, have a look what makes sense for your business as well. I think the worst thing you can do is just go by what the market's charging, because we never understand the other things. So I've definitely seen people where I know that their pricing is lower, but they've got 3 businesses. So actually they're making revenue from other places. People can have lost lead strategies where one of them is not making them enough money by far, because they're doing an upsell on the back that you can't see. And so that's the only caveat I always say pricing is, just do not ever blindly follow someone. And also, someone can be charging something that ain't making no sales and you don't know. So just be careful.
And also, just another point, because we're talking about prices of products and services that are visible, right? Then you've got services that are hella bespoke.
The dark.
And I think I guess the tip I'd leave for that is, find out what the client is willing to pay. Do they have a budget? You know, try to tease that out of them, so you can understand how much value what you're offering is to them. What is that worth? And that might help guide your offering and your pricing.
Yeah, and I think always trying to get more information. So like, I always ask questions on my services about like how good people think it was in terms of like value for money. And it's like, if people keep on being like, this was really good value for money, that's a sign that you clearly can put your prices up. And so I think most of us don't want to have these money conversations. That's the reality. We're like, ugh. But actually having them, and this is like, this week is Talk Money Week, so I'm really glad to get to talk about money. It's really important, because actually that's the only way you know, like you said, rather than you make an assumption, actually ask your client what type of budget they've got before, especially if you are doing proposals, bespoke stuff like that. So we are nearly about to wrap up, and what I would love you to do is just to give like one big takeaway of like, if everyone's even got this far, thank you very much for sure. But also I'm going to be, as a like wrap up for me doing the whole series, I want to be giving like the best top tips from all of the people that have done the series. So share your thing you want people to go away and think about.
Gosh, I was supposed to give myself time to think about this, but let me totally honest there. Let's think back. What did we talk about? We spoke about pricing. We spoke about being blinded by being in the business. I think maybe the biggest tip, which I see with my work that brings about the most transformation, the most change in an upward direction, is if you can bring someone in, like you said, actually, it could be a one-off chat, it could be a one-off meeting, a one-off booking, whatever. Bring someone else in to undo all your business stuff, really get clear about what you're doing, and then hopefully give you some ideas, suggestions, and help you identify opportunities to confidently smash the van.
Well, thank you so much. We've had one sneaky comment just pop in, so I'm going to ask you anyway. So we've got Paul Mumford asked, what if your price is different for every project? So it's obviously picking up on what we just said about like bespoke proposal work. How can you feel, because I suppose that makes it also harder for forecasting, doesn't it? If you really got this like variety, you don't really know. Have you got any tips for how to deal with that world?
Yeah. I mean, that makes me go back to think about who the client is, and do you have a particular client type? If you're working with, I just guess here, I know who Paul is though, but I don't know who you work with. If you're working with companies, is there a certain type of company that you work with, with a certain turnover, potentially a certain level of budget? Maybe it will help if you were to be clear about who it is you're targeting and what their price point is. That way it might be a bit easier for you to offer a product or service at that price level to give you a bit more stability.
And normally I always say to people that do proposals, so if I work with people, like it happens quite often, like when I got like web designers, copywriters, those type of online service providers, where it's not a productized service in that sense. So it's this idea of really understanding what your like minimum for certain types of things will be. So you sort of got blocks, and then you can add them together. And like, regardless of like whatever you're doing, it's like properly knowing what your minimum hourly rate should be. Like, you may never charge it, but you should know that number, so that if you are doing bespoke proposal work, you can always ensure when you've done everything all up that actually this is not it's gonna work. Like financially, what you're offering does make sense. So I always think, Paul, definitely make sure you know that number, because I think that's the biggest thing. When you start to do bespoke proposal stuff, you could end up just being like getting so confused, and actually the number you put across there is like never going to make you enough money in the first place.
I just had a point on what you said actually about having, for example, different blocks or three different services, and that's it. If we link that to doing a plan and doing a forecast, you'd forecast the number of sales for each of the different services throughout the year, right? For example, throughout the month. So you'd know ideally how much money you're looking to generate in that month. Maybe 1 of 1, 2 of 2, 3 of 3 number of sales. Then you know that, okay, I need to get 3 of service number 3 for this month. And if you're looking shy, then you know where to focus your efforts in terms of generating that income. And that could be another strategy to help stabilize your income.
No, definitely. If you sell multiple things, absolutely knowing how many of each you're meant to be selling, whether that is monthly, quarterly, or like annually, is so important, because once you start to sell multiple, the world gets crazy. Crazy in a good way, crazy in a real great way. Well, thank you so much for joining me. It's been lovely to talk to you. We have had quite a few people watching live, which is really exciting. If you are watching this on the replay, please do pop any more comments in below. As I said, we have gotten 4 more videos coming up over the next few weeks, so make sure you're following that hashtag #SmashBat and that you're following me, and I'll see you on Thursday to talk to Debbie Hancock.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.